This past winter, my wife Ashley and I went to South Beach, Miami for the Wine and Food Festival to cook one of the courses for the tribute dinner for Nancy Silverton. 600 plates, our course for 600 plates for Nancy Silverton with those attendees. And we, in order to get there, we went through all the things that you know exactly you have to do to get there. You yourself work 11 shifts straight because you know you're going to have to ask your sous chef to stay behind and work extra, so you want to give him some time off. You do all your prep and pack your coolers. You email back and forth with the host chef in Miami, 16 times. Do we need the 12-inch plate? That would be good. Do you have something like a pasta plate? Do you have a spoon that has the bowl? We'll take 2 interns, please. Yes, between the hours of 3 and 7 on Thursday. You work late. You get home at 1 o'clock in the morning, and then you realize that you're going to a climate that's 82 degrees, and you need to shave your legs. You need to find a sundress. You don't have a clean chef jacket. I know this doesn't describe the experience for everyone, but this is what it's like when you are a small, independent solo restaurant that doesn't have a staff that do these things for you. And you get home very late. You put your head down on the pillow at 3:30 in the morning. At 5:50, you're awake. You have to take your kids to the school, get to the airport. And by the time we arrived in Miami, we get our heavy coolers off the luggage carousel. We get to the hotel. We introduce ourselves to the PM banquet sous chef. We pop the tops on our coolers, make sure our stuff is in the walk-in. We find our rolling rack. We meet the PM dish crew. And by the time we get into our hotel room, our luxurious hotel room, we're now trembling, shaking. The hard-boiled egg from the Hudson News at JFK, the little cinnamon biscuit on the Delta flight, the packet of Cheez-Its says fully worn off, and we are really, really needing dinner and a very fat, juicy martini. And it's 10 o'clock at night in a city that we don't know. But we do our due diligence. Well, one's in the shower, the other's Googling and on the computer figuring out where we can go, and it's so perfect. What we want and need is exactly downstairs, and we can be there in a leisurely 2.5 minutes. The operating hours, kitchen open until 11 p.m. It's 10:26. As we go down leisurely in the elevator, and we arrive to a restaurant. This one happened to be in South Beach. It could have been anywhere in the country. You've all been to it. It's a slow night restaurant at 10:32 p.m. We walked past an unstaffed host stand. There were a few scattered tables of remaining diners lingering. The door to the kitchen was open, and you could see all the dirty 6 pans being stacked up, all the third pans as garde-manger stations are breaking down. There's a waiter doing side work. There are 3 suspicious people at the bar of uncertain relationship. And the bartender has her back to the bar, and she's, batching out her checks in her microsystem or in her computer. And Ashley and I enter, and we pull back the bar stools with hope, fear, thirst, one leg up, like getting in the saddle, and we see the bartender and say, "Are you still serving?" And she turns around and looks at the clock and says, let me check. I had learned to keep my shop hours, my store hours, my hours of operation plus 10 minutes and never minus 20 30 years ago, earlier, before I even had a shop. in a very unlikely, very far away place. I was in Gurme, Nevşehir, which is in central Anatolia in the great country of Turkey. And it's in this region, the Great Steppe, this, if you've been, central Anatolia, it's basically in the middle of nowhere. It's so far away. It's the Silk Road. I was there traveling. I had a backpack. I was 20 years old. I was a lone female traveler. I had wanted to see these 3,000-year-old Hittite cities, these 7,000-year-old settlements. I wanted to see the pre-Ottoman Empire, the Seljuk Turkish mosques. I wanted to see the bizarre lunar landscape of Cappadocia. And being the sort of contrarian jerk that I am, I wanted to go when no one else would be there and against tourist season. So I arrived in early spring, and it was quite cold, still frost at night, snow on mountaintops, very hot during the day, and nothing yet was open or available. I found the one room to stay in. I'm in a tiny little town called Gurme, and across the highway is a restaurant that's not only not yet open, but still being built. And I met the owner, who was a 23-year-old man named Rafai Da, and I stayed for 11 months. I helped him. We cleaned, we cooked. It was so new, the cement was still actually wet. You could smell lime. We were tracking the chalk of the cement across the restaurant. It had a propane tank, a candy stove. We cooked pilaf and kofta and shish kebab, and no one really came. It was too early, but his friends, Adnan and Mehmet, everyone would come and sit and drink raki, and we would build this restaurant together. And Rafai looked like for me, he was 23 years old, which I think is very young to be opening your own restaurant. But he seemed like a full-grown man, and in hindsight, I also think that perhaps manhood was accelerated in Turkey at that time. I know that I had seen 7- and 8-year-old boys really hustling the shoe shine industry. There were 8- and 9-year-olds working in the tea houses. They would carry these trays into the market to deliver tea to the carpet vendor, to the vegetable vendor, and then they would come back around and retrieve the empty glasses and the money and go back to the tea house. The jobs for teenagers seemed to be the stewards on these luxury modern buses. That there are thousands and thousands of modern buses that crisscross the country. It is the way to see the country and the way to travel. And they have stewards like on an airplane. And the stewards bring snacks and water and cologne that you put into your cupped hand and refresh yourself. So I had seen these teens and boys working, and I think Rafai, maybe it wasn't so improbable to be 23 years old and owning and building your own restaurant. One night, we finished our work and cleaned the restaurant. He was sitting down. He sat at the front desk counting his papers, the chits of the night. This is a man that gives new depth to the phrase, smokes like a Turk. He maybe 3 packs a day, and he, as he would often joke as well, he had a 5 o'clock shadow by noon. And even if he had shaved in the morning, and as he often joked, and so did his mother. And he was sitting down smoking and counting the tickets, and it was long over, and the crunch of gravel outside pulls up in front of us a huge gleaming tourist bus. And out come 30 bedraggled, wide-eyed, sunburned tourists And they are lost and fearful and hopeful. And Rafai, without pausing, turned everything on. And he stands up and he pushes the tables together and he starts to slice bread. He makes salads. He turns on the little propane grill. He's making shish kebab and kufta and some salads and some bread. He puts wine, beer, water on the table like a Polaroid photo developing. You just palpably can see these 30 people soften and their shoulders relax and the warmth come to their faces and they enjoy themselves. They are fully restored, brought back to their own humanness. Had he not done it, they would have been arriving at their hotel with maybe whatever water was left in their bottle or some pistachio nuts in their pocket. I was washing dishes, squatting on the floor after they left in a blue plastic bin meant for the donkeys to eat using a garden hose. It's in 1985 in Gurme, Nevşehir, Central Anatolia in Turkey. In 1985 in New York City, Danny Meyer opened Union Square Cafe. 27 years old. Had I asked Rafai at the time, what is your mission statement? Could you please describe your vision? What is the scope of your ambition here? Would you try and define the culture that you hope to build here? Rafai would have stared at me quizzically, not through linguistic confusion. He spoke 4 languages fluently. He would have said Tatlum, Malayam, Ashkam, my honey, my sugar, my sweet, my love. I will make nice restaurants here in Love Valley. By the time I'm opening my restaurant, which is in 1999 in the East Village, I would say I would have looked as quizzically too. I'm not sure I had values that I could have articulated. In the beginning, I just wanted to cook the delicious food and clean it up when you're done, and then you'll pay me, I thought. But to be the owner, you do have to answer a lot of questions right away in the moment, and that is where you start to understand what your own values are. And I don't want to be embarrassed to tell you. I'm not embarrassed. I'll just say what some of the values were, but you have to remember that it was 1999, and some of these things don't even matter anymore. They won't even make you raise an eyebrow or wonder. But the first thing I wanted was, through negative inspiration, I didn't want to work in a restaurant where Susie, the senior server, gets all the best shifts, keeps her own tips, gives $10 to Pedro at the end of the night to marry her ketchups and put up her chairs so that she can leave early and have a drink at the bar. I wanted a pooled house. I didn't want a place where the server, the waitress who fucked up the order, was afraid to come talk to the chef because she'd misfired the ticket, that she would get yelled at from the kitchen. I had worked in the restaurant business my whole life. I started 12 years old as a dishwasher, and I've worked in every position there is, in the front and the back. I've been a cocktail waitress, a private chef. I've worked in catering. I've been the dishwasher, the busser, bakery. And this opening a restaurant, I don't think there's much to recommend it, but one of the nice things about it is the big switcheroo when you're the worker and now you're in charge, and you get to be in charge of everything, and you get to create the world that you wished you had lived in. You can close your restaurant for the whole month of July if you want, just like they do in Europe. Even if you don't live in a socialist country, and you still have to pay those wages and you still have to make payroll, but you can do it if you want. I didn't want a restaurant where the hostess was wealthier than I was and better dressed and made me feel very dirty and inferior when I entered the restaurant. Which is to say, I opened Prune, which is hardly a restaurant. I often consider it the sort of SPCA of the restaurant industry. Because in 1999, there was a big shift happening. It was starting. It used to be the restaurant business, and it was becoming the hospitality industry. The waitress was now a server. The customer had become a guest. Danny Meyer was coming up with very good ideas, excellent answers. And he had come up with this brilliant understanding that 51% of the population, 51% of his applicants had a natural HQ, a hospitality quotient. And he came to realize that that's who he wanted to hire. And this idea became very popular. And he had great influence. He had another restaurant. He had a book that came out that was hugely influential. And it's a great idea. You hire the 51% of the people that are naturally nice, because as he said famously, I can teach you to bartend, but I can't teach you to be nice. So the joke that I've said for many, many years is that I've been cleaning up after Danny Meyer for the last 20 years because we really are the SPCA, and it's very, very, it's a dream to have a 30-seat independent single restaurant in the East Village. It's a, some people aspire to it. I do. It is itself a value to not expand. It is itself a value, a core value to stay on the block in the neighborhood that birthed you. But it does come with some real perils and some real setbacks. You don't often get to hire the 51%. I hire a lot of the 49%. You can't buy the whole allocation of wine. You have to beg for your 4 cases. You too want the Bendel Rosé, for sure. But this comes with, this is the territory of having this independent 30-seat restaurant. I don't think I will be invited back here if I if I don't tell you the good news, which is that you actually can teach people to be nice. I do have a lot of questions about it. Over time, I've started to have big questions and little questions. Very esoteric. If all the cream rises to the top, what happens to the milk? What's wrong with being milk? What does the bedraggled customer look like? Do they have to have gotten up at 5:50 in the morning and put the kids to school and packed the cooler? Did they have to have traveled through the great steppe of Asia Minor and have had a bus accident and a missing tour guide so that by the time they arrive at your restaurant, it is plainly obvious that they need that you want to offer them your help? Is it enough to have just traveled from the Upper West Side to the East Village? Is that bedraggled? And these questions on the ground get very specific because you can get lost in your values. And I have so many values now. I thought I didn't have any when I started, but of course I now have a 62-page employee handbook that I keep adding to. It still says draft at the top 20 years later. Because the small questions are, what is my 26-year-old girl at the door with the brunch waiting list gonna do with this guy who's 40 and comes in and won't make eye contact and does this? She has to serve him. She has to get him what he wants. He wants a table for two. One of the strongest, unrelenting core value that I ended up adopting early on, long ago, is not my own. It's from Greenleaf, Robert Greenleaf. He wrote this in 1972. The way to describe it best that I've ever read or heard is to ask this question. This is the best test question of to be a servant leader. Just confusing two sets of words. You're either serving or you're leading. And this is the question. Do those served grow as persons? Do they, while being served, become healthier, wiser, freer, more autonomous, more likely themselves to serve, to become servants? And what is the effect on the least privileged in society? Will they benefit, or at least not be further deprived? I do have an answer. I know you want your money back if I don't provide an answer. Keep your hours plus 10 minutes, never minus 20. I want to tell this to the girl, the bartender in Miami, and I really want to talk to her boss about it. I don't know if she's nice. I don't need to know if he's nice. And I don't care. I have a solution. Everyone in the building has to know. Everyone in the building knows what the hours of operation of the restaurant are, so that you don't even have to look at the clock. Danny Meyer and Audrey came to Prune for dinner maybe 6 months ago. I love Danny Meyer. He loves me. He loves Prune. And one of our 49% employees got a piece of metal scrubby in the braised shell beans with cardoons and mint. It was there, a tiny piece of metal scrubby. And we all know exactly how that can happen. The dishwasher was scrubbing the pot, a little piece got stuck in the saute pan, the bolts, and it ended up in the side dish bowl. I just want Danny and Audrey to know that if you ever want to come back for some of the green scrubby, we'll be there at 5 of 11, prepared to receive you. Thank you.